I started as a trial lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union, working in New York and then later in Washington, where I became the director of the whole national operation for the American Civil Liberties Union in its effort to persuade the Congress and the executive branch to enforce various aspects of civil rights. So I was involved in efforts to extend voting rights to much more broadly across minority communities. I was involved in women's rights issues, extending various civil rights protections across the board to women. And I was involved in the Watergate crisis and the crisis of government secrecy. I think I'm still the only lawyer who's ever actually interviewed President Nixon under a court order. So I did that after he had left office in connection with one of the wiretap cases that he had been involved in. And I went to Harvard, where I taught at the Harvard Law School and was vice president of the University for Government Affairs. And I really became, for the next 9 years, a higher education specialist, learning all aspects of university work. Later, in the early 90s, when President Clinton was elected, I was asked to join the government as an assistant secretary of state for democracy, human rights, and labor. And in that position was involved in all of the major early 1990s human rights crises in the world. I was deeply involved in the effort to persuade the U.S. unsuccessfully to intervene in Rwanda, and then later to build an international criminal court to try the people who were responsible for the genocide in Rwanda. And then probably the biggest issue that I faced was the war in Yugoslavia. There are really two very powerful images or lessons, in a way, that one takes from having witnessed genocide. First is something breaks in a society, and the glue that holds people together, that means that we can walk down the street and feel safe, or that we can enjoy the company of others who may be different from ourselves and no one's going to attack us. There are laws and there are social customs that hold the society together, but those are not assured. And that's the second lesson that I take away, which is that this could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. There are no magical solutions to the breakdown of society. You have to put it back together again. And it has to be done above all by the people who are there on the ground. You can't impose it, which is why the role that we played as diplomats in bringing about the peace is a complicated one. In the end, we can't impose anything. It's really a question of what the people on the ground do. But on the other hand, if you don't do it right from the outside, you can exacerbate the situation. You can make it worse. The world really can't just stand by when something horrific is going on in another country because there's sovereignty in that country, and that's not adequate. That in fact there is a responsibility both by the government inside and by the outside community to deal with this. But how to deal with it? I mean, there are many different ways. Justice and reconciliation are not necessarily the same thing, and I believe that you have to have justice, that you can't allow someone who's committed genocide to just basically walk away. But on the other hand, you also need an instrument to bring the people together who are so angry at each other.